Just confirming that you can hear me, General. I think you might be muted, General. That should be better now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Can you? Do you?
Yeah. All right, so we'll get going. It's a wonderful evening, Friday, the 9th of August, 2024. My name is Ben Mwine. Welcome to Ask General Muntu as we have conversations here with General Mugisha Muntu. It's a wonderful pleasure to see you today. I hope you're well. You look like you're edging backwards, not the other way around. The average Ugandan seems to be. I have more gray hairs than you do. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. How are you doing?
Easily notice. It's a pleasure being hosted by you, Ben, again. I'd like to thank all the people who are on the different platforms who spend their time to be part of this conversation. Yes, Ben. It's Ben.
With our audio. So please do bear with us if you see a bit of an echo, because we're trying to manage both platforms. So we'll try and manage that easily as we go along the way. So, General, as we get started, the very first question for you, I guess, is what's been going on here in Uganda? We've been seeing a lot of activity around protests against corruption, the march to parliament, as it's been called, and we've not seen the ANT being involved at all. Does that mean that you do not support what's been going on?
This arrangement for the civil disobedience activities was different from what we've seen in the past. And I support the way they handled it, ensuring that it was non-partisan. I think they structured it in a way that all people, as individuals who are inclined to participate in civil disobedience, would do so. And any other linkages could be in the background rather than being at the front. And I would like to believe that if they sustain effort, like in the particular case of those who want to sustain the fight against corruption, to keep organizing, to keep coordinating, because it's something, it's effort that takes a bit of time to build or lift the consciousness in the population, to coordinate effort, put in place the different things which are required to sustain such kind of activities once they take place. It's a good initiative. We are supportive of it. We are not involved in the organizing of it as a party, but as individual leaders within the party, we are supportive of those kinds of actions, much as our concentration mostly is on using a different strategy. The two are not in conflict, nevertheless. And there are many members within NT who, at an individual level, who are inclined to participate actively in civil disobedience activities, do so. They are free to do so. Leaders and members of the party know that we are comfortable with individuals who are inclined to participate in civil disobedience activities to go ahead and do so. And basically, that's our position. And maybe also to emphasize that, again, as I indicated at the beginning, I think it was good that it was not a partisan effort. There are times when the parties themselves, which are inclined to civil disobedience, can initiate actions. That would be different, and it's not in conflict with this particular one, because the issue we are dealing with, corruption, affects all of us, in a non-partisan, non-ethnic, non-religious. So my hope is that that effort continues, and those who are inclined and behind the organization should not lose heart because of it not building the numbers which would be expected. That normally takes time, as long as there's sustained effort and there's organizational discipline to keep on and building hope in those who have started so that they don't slide back, and then the numbers will keep building.
For the turnout for the protests that we saw, would it be fair to say that this hasn't been successful? Because look, you had very few people engaging in the protests that we've had. Is that a condemnation in a sense of the way they were organized compared to what we've seen, for example, in places like Bangladesh and Kenya?
Order. The most critical thing is sustainability. As long as there is a nature of corruption that is going on, the repressive measures of the regime clamp down on those who oppose to the regime. As long as that environment remains, people are going to keep on getting more and more aggrieved. Therefore, those who are inclined to the use of civil disobedience as a tool of protest should not give up because the numbers didn't, come up in thousands or hundreds of thousands. It's never, to me, should not be the measure of success. The measure of success that is that there are people, one, who are organizing, two, who are communicating, three, that some show up. And as long as hope is sustained and more people keep on adding on numbers, it's a building process. It's a building process. The only time when there will be a problem is if you start with many and they reduce in numbers. For example, if you start with 100,000 people, for example, in any civil disobedience activities, and they keep on declining, and over a period of time, maybe in a year's time, you find that you have gone down to 1,000. That is not success in as far as I'm concerned. One would have seen it as a success when you raise 100,000. However, if someone starts with few and keeps it building, so that in a year or 2 years or 3 years, whatever number of years it may take, you find that you can mass 50,000, 100,000, upper than that is success in as far as I'm concerned. Once there is sustainability and continuous effort applied to that method that one will intend to use until you build it a level where it leads you to impact, creating impact. And sometimes it even causes changes in the status quo. So I don't measure success by the numbers you have raised at a particular given time, more so when it is the beginning.
But surely, General, you will accept that when you're trying to carry out an activity like this, involvement of the people that you want to show their aggrievement becomes important. And the truth of the matter is that the turn-up was dismal. Can we at least accept that for a country where we seem to see a lot of noise being made about the pains that we're going through from the current regime and the pain points that people seem to have, you would have hoped that there would be a lot more people than we saw. I don't think, I tried to do the math. I don't think I counted more than 30 people at any given point in this protest. Surely that has to be considered at some level a failure.
of the building continue, I wouldn't make judgment to say that it was dismal or that it was a failure. I wouldn't. I always look at things in terms of a process, in terms of some process can take 6 months, some process can take a year, depending on what the issue is, depending on the levels of consciousness of the population. To me, the most critical thing is that, is there a cause? Are there people who are ready to organize behind that cause? Would they have the ability to sustain it until it builds to a critical point where there can be impact that is desired? As long as all those factors are looked at, I wouldn't have a problem myself. I've been involved in things where we just start a handful of people, and eventually it becomes successful at the end of it all. So I wouldn't be discouraged by the numbers. The only problem anybody who wants to go in that route would be discouraged is that if, because of the numbers, that therefore people give up, It's a struggle.
Isn't that something that will be possible, General? Because if you're thinking about a movement and then you've been thinking about joining the protest, for example, but then you realize there was only 17 people that went, doesn't that discourage you from joining the next time because you're thinking, what's the reward here? Because again, let's be honest, when you put yourself out for this sort of civic action, you're putting yourself at risk in a big way. And sometimes you're having to measure, what am I putting at risk? Is it worth it? So if I'm thinking, looks like I'm going to be in this thing on my own, that becomes a discouragement, doesn't it?
No, personally, I would encourage those who are inclined to, again, as I've already indicated, to use civil disobedience as a tool of struggle, to, one, not be discouraged, two, to learn lessons from every engagement that they participate in, and then see how to overcome, if there are any weaknesses, to overcome those weaknesses. Any issue that need to be dealt with in terms of preparation for the next round, for them to apply their focus on those, so that when there's another round, then they continue and building numbers. I have no problem with numbers when you start with few, as long as you keep applying effort to build them, as long as there's a cause. Because a cause cannot advance itself. There must be people who organize and pursue it until its logical conclusion. So as long as there are people who keep at it, to me, that is the most important thing. Because I know for sure there are two types of civil disobedience, incidentally. There are those where you organize and you build around an issue, and then you can mass numbers of people or whatever numbers are raised, and you execute that. But also, too, there is a time when there are spontaneous actions, more so when people are so aggrieved. And then there's one extra mistake which a regime does, which acts as a trigger, and then people spill onto the streets. And those are two different. Now, in Uganda, the one which is being applied is where people are organizing. It's not spontaneous, but it's not in conflict with at some point, and I suspect down the road we are going to see spontaneous actions at some point. It should not discourage those who want to organize consciously, deliberately around the issues like corruption and any other issues, to keep at it and keep building the numbers, overcoming whatever weaknesses they would have noticed in any event that they organize around. They should not give up. There is a cause, and the civil disobedience is a legitimate tool of struggle. It's constitutional, it's legitimate. Therefore, those who are inclined onto it should not feel discouraged at all. I mean, look at those who engage in warfare as a method of struggle, like some of us got engaged in. I mean, people die, and you know that these are going to be buried, and others are wounded. But you don't give up. You keep fighting until you achieve victory.
or defeat, depending on whichever way it goes, right?
Yeah. If you apply wrong strategy and wrong tactics, yes, you can easily be defeated. But once there's a cause, it means that others can still use the same method and succeed. When whatever method you use, there must be selection of a correct strategy and the application of good tactics.
Yeah. I guess we can't doubt you on the issue of numbers, because you and a bunch of misfits went and started a war, 27 people, and you managed to overthrow an entire government. So I guess I can give you credit to that when you say that numbers at the beginning are not that important. What I do think is something that might be worth getting your thoughts on. If we're saying, for example, that this particular movement has been trying to fight corruption, as it was, and the march to parliament, wouldn't it make sense for there to be a unified voice? Isn't this one of the places where you would want to say that as the opposition in Uganda, we are all standing behind this thing because we, at least on this particular subject, we are speaking one language. We are saying no to corruption. Wouldn't that have made a lot more sense?
Yeah, we've spoken out as individual leaders. We have spoken out in support. The only difference, of course, was that we didn't go on the streets. And basically, as far as I'm concerned, or at least where ANT is concerned, and we've been expressing ourselves to that effect, we want to concentrate on the strategy that we are working on. We have no problem with the strategy of civil disobedience. We can be supportive of it in different ways. We can speak out in support. We allow individual members of the party, it's clear to all that none should wait to be invited. Those who are inclined to engage in civil disobedience, to participate in that. Focus is very, very important as far as I'm concerned. Once you choose a strategy to pursue, you need to focus effort, resources, and time on that. The one thing is to divide attention, as far as I'm concerned. And therefore, that's why there was a used to be saying in the 60s and 70s, which was like one struggle, many fronts. So I really would like to hope that people who are involved on different fronts should concentrate time, effort, and resources on the front where they are at, and keep building capabilities, keep organizing. And then there can be collaboration of effort as we move along. Dividing attention, as far as I'm concerned, from my understanding, can disorient you. To be involved in too many different things. We are in a very, very complicated, environment. And we also really don't have the necessary resources because it costs. So if whatever resources you have, the strategy that you believe in, concentrate the resources there. And then you can be supportive of the other strategy in different ways, but don't divide your effort. Don't divide resources to the extent that is possible. These are issues of strategy and tactics.
Speaking of costing, General, we have had a number of young people being arrested. I put out a message out today asking for people to share some of the questions that they wanted to put to you. And one of the ones that came out prominently was why not just you as the ANC, but generally the opposition didn't seem to come out strongly in defense of some of the young people that were arrested. And I stand to be corrected, but I don't know if we've seen any official position from you or the party, or most of the other parties actually coming out to demand for justice for the people who have been arrested and the grounds on which they are arrested for the protests.
We've condemned those kinds of actions for quite a while. The position remains the same. we're against repression. And to the extent that is possible, for example, if we had resources as a party, we don't have that kind of resources. We are trying to concentrate whatever resources in the areas where we've been operating. Right now, actually, we are on a halt because we don't have the resources even to pursue the strategy that we've been working on. But one thing I'm so sure about is that if we're in a position to even make contributions to like the efforts to help those who are in prisons and things like that, we would. We have no problem about that at all. But again, talk about resources. You see, like those who are involved in civil disobedience, a lot of money which is required for so many things, so many things that need to be done. At individual levels, yes, at this point, I believe individuals can make contributions. The parties which have got resources can also do so. And I would like to believe that the moment we get our own resources, it is in causes like those, for example, running to help those who are in hospitals or like those who are in prisons. We would gladly be able to make contributions to that. We have no problem with that at all. What we only deliberately do is to ensure that we keep focused on the strategy which we are pursuing, while we encourage those who are pursuing the strategy of civil disobedience also to concentrate on that. Then we keep on diminishing the capabilities of the regime. We keep on raising consciousness in the population, but also keep preparing for post, because that's another thing which we should all do. Those who are involved in civil disobedience, as much as those who are involved in us who are building the grassroots infrastructure. The thing that we need to continue coordinating effort on is preparing and organizing for the next dispensation, because a regime can be moved out through different ways. There are many ways through which regimes change. But the most critical thing, when regimes change through whatever means, whether it is through a protracted people's war, like what we did, if it is or through disobedience, or through an electoral process, or through coups, eventually the country has to be managed. And therefore, those who are involved in whatever strategy they're involved in must keep that in their day-to-day activities. That's the only area where you have to do both simultaneously, whatever strategy you're applying. Because you see, the moment you succeed in what you're pursuing, then what? Because if you go in when you've not been simultaneously organizing how you can manage power, you can easily get in there and you'll find that you are doing the same very things that you were fighting against.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, in terms of the things that were laid out as demands when these protests were starting, do you think that the people who were trying to organize this could have been better advised? I don't know if I'm sure you did have a chance to look at the demands that they put up, but it seemed to me like, from my personal perspective, that the things that they were asking for didn't seem to. Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Don't know if you can hear me.
I can't hear you.
Is it just me? Could someone confirm that you can hear me, please? Right, General, can you hear me now?
Then I seem not to.
I'm just trying to confirm.
Actually,
can you hear me? Because we can hear you, General. I can hear you. I'm not sure if anyone else can hear me. Could you just kindly confirm if you're following the conversation? Could you maybe just type a comment and let me know if you can hear me? Let's try and see if we can sort this. General, can you hear me now? General, can you hear me well now? Just trying to check with the tech team to make sure that we are able to communicate. I seem to have audio on my side. I can hear you, but it seems to be that you are not able to hear me properly.
Ben's mic is muted.
Um, General, can you hear me now? I think for the technical team, could we kindly check General's audio, his earphones, I think, just to make sure that he can actually hear me, because my mic seems to be fine and I can hear him perfectly well, but it seems that he cannot hear me.
Ben, are you requesting on Twitter?
I am actually already in as a speaker. I don't know. Can you hear me?
No, we can't hear you as a speaker. It's showing us you as a listener.
Well, that's interesting. I need to refresh the spaces on X. Then just give me a second. Let me do that.
Yes. All of you think we're getting Ben back.
Could you please confirm that I am on now?
Not yet.
Okay, just give me a second. Let me try something here.
Yeah, take your time. Um, while you do that, there is a Varugahara who wants to sort of ask a question.
Right.
Can we see if it can go through Geno?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, sure. I think we should try doing that.
Yeah. Let's see if that question goes. Jahana, you still have a question you wanted to ask?
Our main focus, indeed, as you've noticed, or you have noted, is to build the party infrastructure at the lower levels. It is something we are so convinced about that any organization which is going to transform this country needs to build the people who, one, believe in the strategy they apply, who all share the same values and principles that the party espouses. That's our main focus. The only limitation has been resources. But to the extent that we raise resources, we make outreach programs. We've traveled to a number of districts. We've been at sub-county levels in a number of districts where we go to. So right now, our concentration is raising resources to ensure that we keep on making those engagements. Because in the engagements that we make at the sub-county level, we meet maybe about 200, 300 people, and we sell the message of the party to attract men and women who believe in the cause for change, who would want to see a country where there is transparency in the management of national resources, where there is justice, where there is fairness, where there is equality before the law. Once you get the nature of leaders and members who believe in those values, and you build them at the sub-county and the parish levels, and they become leaders and members of the party, you would have effectively established a firm foundation on the basis of which you now move to the second phase. Second phase is popularizing the party. There are a number of things that we have in plan. How to popularize the party, how to brand it, how to build the momentum they are talking about. Because while we do that consciously and deliberately, slow as it seems, it is so critical that we know that if we don't have those members and leaders who have common thinking, who subscribe those values, getting into power, yes, you will get it, you can get into power. Any of the parties can get into power. But then when you get there, then what happens? The scenario in that regard is that there is a high likelihood that because you have not built a significant number of leaders who believe, for example, in a zero tolerance stance in the fight against corruption, that you can reach there and then you find that within a year or two, you are sacked. Because there's a very strong, deep culture of corruption in this country. The way you can effectively fight against it is that you must be organized and you must have a critical number of leaders at all levels. Because corruption is not only at the national level. You have leaders at the national level, at the district level, at the sub-county level. And then that's the only way you can effectively transform the country. Now, many people seem not to appreciate that, but we do. And at least as we are convinced that whatever impediments are in our way, that's the right way we should go, and we'll keep at it. Do people get discouraged? Yes, there are many people who get discouraged by that. But see, those of us who are in leadership, who have done a conscious, deliberate analysis of the situation, who are convinced that that's the only way, we are not going to divert from that path. Yeah. Because our focus is not just being in power. Some of us have been in power before, but see the mess which is happening. So if we don't prepare ourselves to break the country out of the vicious cycle in which it has got stuck for 60 years, why on earth would we abandon a strategy which we know is the solution and jump onto something else, even if it could build us momentum, even if it could build us, it can build excitement, because momentum also has to be sustained. I know of situations where an organization can have momentum, maybe for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then it goes down. So the moment we go into the second phase, which will require us to be doing things that will build momentum, we want to have it sustained. I understand people who don't understand that strategy. We have no problem with that. Our comfort is that there's going to be a time in the future when people look back and appreciate what we are doing. Now there are many who don't appreciate that. And we understand where they're coming from. And we have no problem with them. But there's a time when they appreciate what we are doing. And we have no intentions of diverting from that. So if you are someone who is in Alliance for National Transformation, or you are supportive of it, be encouraged. That much as there is a slowness in the way things are happening, and there it's the problem of resources, which we intend to go into that area of fundraising. We've been doing applying effort in that regard. There are a number of other actions we intend to apply soon. And my hope is that we'll be able to get people who can appreciate and raise the resources that would apply in this strategy. Because once it succeeds, that's the only this country can be broken out of this vicious cycle.
Speaking of, General, I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, I can, yes. I can.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes.
So speaking of success, if you look at what's happened in Bangladesh at the moment and what we've been seeing in Kenya, what do you say?
The Kenyans,
the people who suggest that this strategies, Kenya, for example, if you look at what be anywhere between $3 and $4 billion in just the last month or so, could it be self-defeating, trying to go this way, that we end up taking the country backwards instead of trying to go forwards in this effort?
I didn't get the question clearly, but I suspect you're asking about the Gen Z movement in Kenya. Maybe I don't know whether you're asking about
the and I was asking that if you look at what they've been doing there, is it something that you can consider a success, considering that Kenya now is losing billions of dollars almost on a daily basis because it's been crippled? They've gone from one thing to another, and as we speak, I think even as far as yesterday, the protests were still going on. Doesn't this end up being counterproductive, where the country ends up moving backwards instead of forward?
The Gen Z movement has only been successful to the extent that the regime, fortunately for the Kenyan regime, it has made concessions. And it looks like there has also been attempts in negotiations. One hopes that when they negotiate, that they'll come out with positive outcomes. If they do come out with positive outcomes and the objectives of the Gen Z are aligned with the new practices that will be applied. For example, if effort is applied in the fight against corruption and streamlining whatever other issues were of concern to them, that's when you would call it success. At the end of the day, the outcomes. But if there's spontaneous actions that there has been, and the massive turnout, and there are concessions by the regime, if that is short-lived, and within a very short period of time, things slide back, then basically they wouldn't have been success, without doubt, because success at the end of the day is what you achieve as the outcomes.
Yeah. Do you think that might have been one of the problems with the planned protests here in Kampala? Because if you look at the demands that were being put across, they seem to have been a little bit unrealistic. Some of them included the resignation of the speaker. They included reduction of the salaries of the MPs. These are surely not things that people can expect to be changed overnight. Do you think that would have had an impact on the lack of progress for the protests here in Kampala?
The environments are completely different. The Kenyan environment and the Ugandan environments are completely different. One in terms of practices in the past, at least as we have seen them so far. Kenya, they have been involved in civil disobedience activities for quite a number of times. I think in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s. So it is a practice that they've been, it's part of their political culture in Kenya. Two, the response of the Kenyan regime has not been as brutal as what we'd expect to happen here in Uganda. The consciousness is also different in Kenya as well as in Uganda. The middle class in Kenya was heavily involved. I mean, the Gen Z cut across board, even those who come from families of those who are in government. To a large extent, a number of them were involved in this. Here in Uganda, it's still different. So you can't easily compare the two situations. Nevertheless, here in Uganda, we've never had sustained civil disobedience actions in the past, not even now. What we have had here is there have been some spontaneous, but a number of times when they are suppressed, there is a lag, and it takes a long time. We've never seen those which have been sustained for a long time. However, the situation here has been different. Here, you look at things, on the surface of things, and you think there's calmness. Uganda is prone to eruptions. We have had violence that Kenya has never had. We have gone through civil wars here. We've gone through armed warfare. Kenya has never had that. The only attempt which happened in 82 was an attempt at a coup, which, fortunately for them, was suppressed. Here we've gone through coups, we've gone through armed warfare for long lengths of time. We have had, there's a time when we had 7 rebellions here in Uganda at the same time. So we have different conditions. Nevertheless, those who are inclined to the use of civil disobedience, they should not be discouraged by the turn-up. They should not be discouraged by that environment you are talking about. They should not be discouraged by the nature of the regime in the sense that it's application of brute force. Because a struggle is a struggle. I mean, there are those who take up arms and fight. And when you take up arms, you know that you are going to meet casualties without doubt. Some will die, others will be wounded. And civil disobedience, yes, there can be casualties. There's no doubt about that. We have seen that happen a number of times. But when there is a cause, and there are people who are focused to fight until the logical conclusion of whatever strategy they apply, have to keep at it. They have to keep organizing, raising consciousness, coordinating effort, raising resources, training leaders, layers of them. So in the event that one layer is arrested, another layer springs up. This takes time, takes discipline, takes effort, takes resilience. So people should not be discouraged. But until we have sanity in this country, as long as, and the most critical thing is that whatever strategy people choose, it needs to be conscious. When you choose a strategy, or whatever path you choose to pursue, you need to understand the dangers along that path, and then work out ways on how to mitigate or how to avoid them, but without abandoning whatever strategy you believe in. That happens not only here in Uganda, worldwide.
Let's talk about the corruption and just how bad it is in Uganda in general. There have been suggestions in the recent past that the corruption seems to be across both sides of the aisle. What are your thoughts on the allegations that seem to be thrown around that many of the opposition politicians actually also seem to be on the payroll of the people who we are trying to get rid of as being corrupt?
Yeah, I mean, we are all products of our society. All of us, the political class, we are all products of our society. And corruption is deep in this country. And that's why whatever effort is applied in the use of civil disobedience to fight against corruption, I know for sure that yes, it can bring these issues to the public mind, can raise the consciousness of the population, and also frighten the regime, and hopefully it can backtrack. But I am almost fully convinced that corruption cannot be gotten rid of as long as this regime is still in power. That's one. Two, that even when this regime falls or exits, as definitely, inevitably it will exit, that any group which goes into power must be so well organized that it would have built the capability not only to confront, but also overwhelm the corrupt and also the culture of corruption. That's why all of us who are involved in different strategies, those who are involved in civil disobedience, those of us who are involved in party building and other activities we are involved in, must combine simultaneously. As you're on the front of civil disobedience, you're also building capabilities on how to manage power at the point when this regime exits. Those of us who are involved in building grassroots infrastructure and also raising leaders, men and women of integrity. For us, we are conscious about it. We do both simultaneously because we know that at some point, this regime is going to exit one way or another.
How do you create that coordination, General? Because at the moment, each of you guys in the opposition seems to be doing their own thing with, there's an assumption that you're operating in silos, so to speak, because each of you seems to be doing their own thing, but you're suggesting that we need to be able to have that coordination, that whether it is civil disobedience or building from the ground up, that needs to be coordinated. We don't seem to see that coordination at the moment. How do we ensure that we can actually be able to build that?
We need to, I mean, for us, and those of us who are in Alliance for National Transformation have no problem. We are always open to, once we are invited to any meeting to discuss any issue, we would participate. Because we look at a struggle as you see a human being. A human being has got 2 legs, has got 2 arms. And to move effectively, you keep moving one leg after another, left to right, or whatever you start off with. And then we need the use of arms if you are not, unfortunately, disabled. The left hand, the right hand work together. So we have no problem in coordinating effort because the different strategies are not in conflict. The only new thing that I noticed, which is a good development, is that the different strategies are not attacking each other. In the past, it used to be a big, big problem, and it would really cause unnecessary conflict. It shouldn't. There must be concentration of effort. And then where it requires coordination in terms of meetings, of discussions, and see where inputs can be used to back up any strategy. For example, those who have got parties and they have got resources to back up those who are in civil disobedience, maybe in prisons to raise funds to put to that cause. I would see no problem whatsoever in regard to that. For us, we're always open to meetings. There's no meeting we've ever been invited to and we don't attend it. We go, we listen, we go back to the party, we discuss in our management, in our interim committee, and then we go back and give briefings, we give feedback, say, yes, we can collaborate effort on this. Here, we won't be able to do this, but we support what you are doing. So I don't see any problem whatsoever in regard to that.
You have mentioned on several occasions, and I keep hearing you talk about this, the fact that this government will go eventually one way or another, and that we must be ready for what happens when it does go. The regime does fall or change for that matter. In the early 2010s, we had the Arab Spring, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, Syria. From the time that those revolutions, if you want to call them that, or movements happen in general, we can't seem to say that Libya or Egypt or Sudan or Tunisia are in a better place. How important do you think it is that even as this new wave of Gen Z revolutions happen, I think Nigeria has now taken hold. It's becoming a bit of a problem there. The Bangladeshi people have changed their government. As per yesterday, actually, they have a new prime minister in charge. They've managed to push the Kenyan government to make some concessions. Based on the history we've seen from the Arab Spring, the fact that while there was change of government at that time, it actually seemed to have led to regression. How do we get your compatriots, the rest of the leaders in this country, to understand that change of government for the sake of change is not going to do us any good, and there is no precedent that we can pick on where things have actually been better, where there was no clear plan for where they were going, because we seem to be in the exact same spot.
That's the unfortunate thing in terms of no, there's a flaw in humanity. I think we seem to find it easier to fight against what we don't want, rather than to organize efforts to fight for what we want. When you look at all those countries, it seems to me, I don't have details, I have not lived in those countries, that because of repression that there was by those dictatorship that they were, that those who got involved in civil disobedience actions were focused more on overthrowing the regimes than organizing to fight for a better country, to the extent that when they succeed in removing the regimes, that they would put in place vehicles of governance that were better, either political parties or movements. So when the regimes were overthrown, they found themselves in a dilemma. Regimes are gone, but they have not built the necessary organizational capabilities to hold the country together and then move it in the correct direction. That seems to be a big flaw. Because I notice it even here. You engage with people, and people seem to think that, oh, the moment an authoritarian regime is out of power, everything will flow smoothly. You know, you have to do both. You must put effort in removing a regime, but as you build capabilities to remove the regime, simultaneously you must build the capabilities to manage power at the point when you take it. It doesn't happen, you know, by accident, that you just take power and then suddenly you start managing it well, unless you organized yourselves purposefully, consciously to do that.
How well has that gospel been received so far? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you seem to be the only one preaching that gospel at the moment. And again, as we've just said, again, the precedent is very clear. There is no single country that has gone through this that has ended up in a better place than it was before. So what makes the Ugandan movement that is trying to change the regime think it will be different from any other country? The ANT, as far as I'm concerned, because of my interactions with you and what I've seen you doing, seem to be the only ones who are saying, let's plan for what happens after and not simply focus on removing the regime. Who have you been engaging with this in terms of that dialogue? What has the response been so far? How do you feel about our preparedness?
We're encouraged by the interactions we have with the people at the levels where we operate from, and we operate at the sub-county level. There is no part of this country where we have been and the message has not been appreciated. There's no part of the country where we have been and met with resistance. That encourages us. That's what sustains us to keep doing the things amidst all the challenges that we do face. And therefore, we know that the moment we get resources and are able to cover the whole country, we will be able to establish the necessary infrastructure organizationally, and also to attract the leaders whom we know that the moment we take power, either alone as Alliance for National Transformation or as part of a coalition, that would exert that influence, because we would have purposefully, consciously built around the values which we espouse as an organization. We have learned from history. We have seen changes in this country. But those who take power within a very short time start doing the very things that they were condemning. You know, like UNRF had the top cream of our society, professors, doctors, lawyers who met in Arusha and formed UNRF. NCC possibly could have been one body that had the highest levels of education ever this country has ever had in a legislative body. But see what happened. Actually, the first thing they did, which we were frightened, those of us who had hope, that now these are people who are educated. They will fix the problems of this country. The first thing they did was allocate themselves the foreign exchange from Bank of Uganda, which they never even paid for. What does that mean? That yes, they were educated, but they were disorganized. They were not focused. They didn't share values. Because if they shared values, I don't see how they could have done that as the first thing that they did. And of course, subsequent to that, the number of actions that they did, you could see that they were simply, they came together as an act of convenience to get rid of what they were against, get rid of the military regime. Thereafter, they had no common program. So how can we not understand that? That if we repeat the same mistake, are we kids? What kind of human beings are we?
Yeah, I think they say to do the same thing, expecting different results is the classic definition of insanity, and that seems to be exactly the case. Bangladesh is a very good example. We've just seen Sheikh Hasina, who's been prime minister there for 15 years, Topo. When she came into power, she came in as the leader of the people, and everyone was expecting that this was going to be a new dawn. And here we are, 15 years later, and she's been thrown out by the very people that she was supposed to be coming in to save. Speaking of, let's pivot a little bit and look ahead to 2026 as we sort of think about the possible options that are available from the electoral process side of things. We are about to begin a new electoral cycle. We seem to be getting into that mode. Do elections still make sense to us at the moment in Uganda from what we have seen? Do you have any confidence that the 2026 election could provide an opportunity for Ugandans to be able to make their voice heard and make sure that they are respected?
The electoral process in this country is, highly compromised. There are so many problems in the electoral process. There's no doubt about that. But we believe that whenever there is any time available, exercise effort, utilize time, apply resources to build yourselves to a point where you believe that you can overwhelm the regime in spite of the challenges that you meet. Worst case scenario. Best case scenario, that there is a year and a half that there can be change, one or another. So it is a way of thinking that you don't look at the impediments you are going to meet and let them either frighten you or cause you to give up in doing something you believe in. That's the way of doing things, not only in politics, whether it's in business, whether it is in personal life. It is a mindset. We operate from that mindset. That don't look at the difficulties that you are likely to face, because those difficulties, you've experienced them in the past, and therefore you let that discourage you. Our mindset is that, yes, in spite of what happened in the past, you must continue organizing yourself, believing and hoping that things could be different and better. But also, too, even if they are not different or better, that you keep organizing yourselves to a point where you can overwhelm the system in spite of the impediments in the way. I keep using an example, like the boxers in a ring. If a boxer who is good at what they are doing and they have, the discipline and focus at the bodily level and also at the mind level. If they suspect through observation that the referees might actually be biased, that boxer needs to go into that ring, focusing and preparing to give his opponent a technical knockout. Because when this boxer goes in and is able to achieve that, if that boxer knocks out the other person, even when the referees would be biased, there is something they cannot reverse in that regard. But that guy is knocked cold on the floor, and this guy will have to count 1, 2, 3. Even if he extends the period between 1 and 2, and 2 and 3, that guy is down cold. This guy who prepared for a technical knockout will win that boxing match. So you organize and prepare for that. That doesn't happen only in politics. You go into the military, you will find that you have to prepare to fight and people will die until you capture power. Or any other strategy that you apply. You don't let the difficulties that you are likely to face impede you. If they impede you and you give up, then you must be able to accept to remain, a slave.
Right. In the context of the elections, what would a preparation for a technical knockout like that look like? If you know that the system is already sort of set up against you, how do you try and circumvent it?
For example, we have seen what happened. We have seen what has happened in other elections. If I may use this last one of Uganda. Uganda was heavily NRM. Within 6 months, it turned around to NUP. NUP gave NRM and General Museveni a technical knockout here in Uganda. They took 57 members of parliament. And yet they had not had enough time to organize because they hardly 1 year of being a party. I think by the time they got into these elections, they were about 6 months. So what does that mean? That when a population changes, that's very, very difficult even for the regime to cheat. Same thing happened in Busoga. When Bobby Wine beat General Museveni in Busoga, the only problem in Busoga, then when they voted against General Museveni at the top, they voted for NRM leaders at the parliamentary, at the ROC3, at the ROC5. So what does that mean? That we need to concentrate a lot in explaining to people, to understand, and also to create hope in them, to know that it is possible actually to overwhelm this regime. Because if you get like 3 regions, all of them voting against in the regime in that manner, how can it succeed? Problem I notice is that people are the ones who are impeding themselves. When you talk about such possibilities, people look at the current environment and you hear people say, oh, that is not possible. Yes, that means you have already been beaten. Because what General Museveni does is psychological warfare, which he applies to the extent where people give up and say, there's nothing which is possible. How can you be a human being and think there is anything which is impossible? We have seen people overcome odds since creation. This is always the first time. Any human being looks at any situation, this is impossible, you are captured already. So that's why we have to keep working on the mindsets of the Ugandan people, more so people who have got influence. So they exert that influence in their spheres of influence to encourage people to know that this is possible. This is our life. We pay taxes. The taxes are being mismanaged. There's joblessness. There's a problem this country could even reach a point where it just simply implodes. We must impede that. We must stop it in time. And therefore, let's make the necessary sacrifices and shift support from the regime. We have to keep working on that.
Yeah. If you have any questions for General Muntu, please do put them in the chat and we'll try and go through a few of them so that we can be able to deal with them before we wrap up the space for this evening. But even as we wait for a couple of questions to come through, General Muntu, you've been talking a lot about resources and the importance of those. Again, from your analysis, and you just talked about the TKO that NUP was able to deliver to the NRM in Buganda. do you think resources had anything to do with that? And going forward into 2026, how do you manage to do something similar, even with the limitation of resources that, for example, the ANT has at the moment?
At the time it engaged in elections, had not had enough time to organize. Fortunately for them, because of the momentum that there was, they got significant amounts of resources from the diaspora, from the Ugandan community. So that extent, that was good. I hope they will be able to sustain the mobilization of resources from the public. Unfortunately, the Ugandan public is not psychologically prepared to support parties much, much earlier before the election. Election, when you put resources behind the party during elections, it is helpful to some extent, but at times it's too late. You need to put money into a party early enough so that it's able to build the party infrastructure, able to raise candidates, able to train agents, able to train candidates, able to put the logistical requirements to back up the candidates at the different levels. And that's another campaign we need to engage in a non-partisan manner. I would be happy to hear, for example, people who go on, in religious circles, in mosques, in churches, people who are in civil society organizations, cultural institutions. All of them talk to Ugandans that it is their civic duty to support different parties that they subscribe to. Those who subscribe to the movement, they can give money to the movement if they want. The difference there is that the movement uses our own money, all of us, the taxpayers, without our consent. But those who are in the opposition parties, those who support JEMA should put money into JEMA. Those who support NUP, FDC, NT, and DP, and others should do so to invest in the future, to influence how the future should look like. They should not just sit back and hope that something good is going to happen by itself or by accident. Nothing good hardly ever happens by accident. There must be investment of time, effort, and resources. And when we talk about money, normally people think that maybe each individual has got to give a lot of money. No, we keep saying, look, the cumulative effect of people who contribute, say, 10,000 per month. If a party has got 100,000 Ugandans who support it, and they are able to raise 10,000 per month, that's 1 billion shillings per month. Any party which has got focused leaders, disciplined leaders, I can tell you, once it applies those resources in doing the necessary things to build a party, I can tell you within a year there will be a party that is robust and it would impact the situation so radically. I know for sure, once a party has got leaders who are focused and disciplined.
Yeah. Speaking of that, focus and discipline, in the last election, the ANT seemed to have some challenges, again, partly because of the resources, in terms of being able to field candidates across the entire country, and you actually had to focus on particular places. How much better do you think, how much better do you think you'll be able to do for the next election? How far along are you in terms of being able to field more candidates? How's that been going for the ANT so far in preparation for 2026?
All of it still is hinged on resources. So that's why we are trying to put a lot of effort in the mobilization of resources. We'll keep at it. The extent to which we'll succeed is going to be highly dependent on the extent to which we'll be able to mobilize the resources.
And again, I want to deliver that question because we don't seem to have a lot of time before you have to start getting busy with campaigns and all of that. If you're to assess yourself, I know you're very optimistic as always, but how tough is it at the moment in terms of being ready for that?
Right now, we don't have the necessary resources to make us move as we would have desired to move. The movement is still slow. Nevertheless, we are fighting for our future. So we will keep doing whatever is necessary to keep doing what we have to do. One thing that is not an option is giving up. Even if it means walking, we will walk until we set ourselves free as a people.
Yeah. In terms of the current environment, again, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, and I wanted us to just talk about it a bit. Basing on what we've been seeing around the region, what's going on, how far worse off are we than we were in 2021? Or how much better have things become in terms of the environment, the mood amongst the people towards the establishment? There was an accusation for a long time that Ugandans seem to be apathetic. We've sort of allowed that this is a reality and we are okay with it. From your engagements as you've been going around the country, because I know that you've at least been able to travel around the whole of Uganda, what sort of sentiments are you getting from people vis-a-vis to where we were 3-4 years ago?
The situation now is politically is more ripe for change than 2021. There are more people who are more aggrieved than before, including those who are in the movement. There's no doubt about that. But on the other side, the movement is more and more desperate. I suspect and I really hope that they don't go in that direction, but they are likely to do more desperate things than they have done before.
The problem with the desperation generally is that sometimes it can come with a lot of negative connotations because, again, like you said, the ripeness for change might not necessarily be a good thing. You and I spoke a little bit about this the last time we had this conversation. And I'll make reference to what's happening in Kenya at the moment, because for some of the people who might be listening to the call, they don't know what we went through back in the 81 to 85 war. I happened to live through that. I've shared the story of how I had to walk for 3 days to get to Kajara, with my mom and my brother. Do you think that our young people maybe don't appreciate what chaos can do to a country? Because that's usually my concern, that the people who want to pour on the streets, and we've seen this in, again, Kenya, Bangladesh, Venezuela is currently in the throes of that. My sentiment seems to be that it can do a lot more damage than good. But it seems that a lot of our young people don't know that because they've never seen any of this difficulty.
Yeah, but change is inevitable. Change is inevitable. Most of those who are in a government are the ones who need to know that if they don't do a number of things to ensure that change is peaceful and is smooth for the good of the country, if they don't do that, change happens. And unfortunately, that's where it can come in different ways. And that's at times when a country gets wrecked. But that's inevitable. Because I can tell you one thing that is inherent in human beings is a desire for freedom, a desire for dignity, a desire to see them being, a desire for fairness, a desire for justice. So when you press people, there's an extent where, you can press and the people get aggrieved, you keep pressing and people get more aggrieved, you apply more force, people become more desperate, and there's always that time when there's an implosion. Any leader who cares about the country should never push a country to that point. However, when they push it that point, always something triggers a situation. I mean, look at Sudan, really. Like Khartoum. Why on earth would any leader push a country to the point where Bashir and his cohorts pushed Sudan to that point? Or the other countries that have gone through that kind of chaos, or what we experienced here, and now what we are facing right now. The unfortunate thing with human beings, those who get drunk with power, most of the time they think they are going to be the exception. They look at all these situations which have happened elsewhere, and then they think they will be the exception, and they are never the exception. So let's keep organizing here. We can't lose hope.
Yeah, we seem never to learn. Let's take a couple of questions for you, General. I've got one here from at Black Chanzi, who says, General, you said that you're mobilizing, strategizing, etc., and he's saying down here we don't seem to be feeding anything. It seems that the party is not doing much. Do you really expect anything from the next election? I think you've touched on that, but maybe you can just respond to that as well. And then this is from Edgar, who says, what does General think about the arrest of FDC members in Kenya by, and he puts it in quotes, Ugandan security operatives, and how do you think that would affect the East Africa Pamoja spirit? And then one more question here, General, from McRoad, who is asking what ideas you think might be useful to mobilize more people to join this fight against corruption, because apparently people don't seem to be joining this fight at the moment. You can maybe answer those while we try and get a few more. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll have General answer those.
On them, the act of the arresting of FDC members or supporters, because one thing I had a doubt that they would have gone to engage in training for warfare. What I suspect they would have been in Kenya for would have been like a workshop, most likely about civil disobedience actions, which are legitimate, which are constitutional, but it is, those actions by the regime is just simply to cause fear in the population or in those who tend to be activists, to deter them so that people become fearful in joining these activities. It is absolutely unfortunate. I've not yet understood the reasons why Kenyan government handed them over to Uganda. I have not got the details yet. That's absolutely unfortunate.
Someone here is asking, this is Andrew Ajuka. Thanks a lot for being on the call. He says that in most countries that have tried to have civil change, the armed forces usually hijack the revolution or usually have to come in and take charge. How far have we as the ANT gone in changing the mindset of a particular set of people, especially you having been a former army commander will understand this very well. And again, we've seen this happening in Bangladesh in particular, where the army had to come in to sort of stabilize things before they had Yunus sworn in as a leader. I think yesterday it was. Have you had any engagement with the armed forces, especially because you have been their leader before and you probably know them very well, to prepare for when this change does inevitably come?
The sense I get about the security services, one, the army, the police, the intelligence services, I know for sure that there are a number of well-educated officers and men in those institutions. And two, there are a number of them who are well-trained in terms of, being professionalized. I also know that there are men who have been exposed to situations of failed states. There are men who have operated in Somalia. There are those who've participated in South Sudan. There are those who've been in Central African Republic. And I believe that those lessons are not lost onto them. I have a sense that there are many really who would want to see sanity in this country, those who want to see stability, those who want to see a country that is on track in terms of sustained economic growth and development. And therefore, I also think that they would be looking at a situation where, in the event that there is a credible political force that they believe can hold this country together and be able to move it forward to the benefit of all citizens, including them, because they're in uniform. First and foremost, they're citizens before they become soldiers. I would like to believe that that would be a high contributing factor in influencing their thinking. So we have work to do on our side, those of us who are in politics, to build, our organization to the extent that not only the army and the police and intelligence services, but even a citizen himself or herself who looks at an organization and say, yes, we can trust that this organization can take power, can hold the country together, can stabilize a situation if it was unstable, and can move the country out of this vicious cycle we've been rotating for the last 60 years and moving in a positive direction. That's work on our side. But in the event that there is chaos and there seems to be no fulcrum around which a country can move, I think that would be really a very frightening situation for the country. nature hates vacuums. And when there are vacuums, so many wrong things can happen. It's incumbent upon us to do everything humanly possible to keep buildings in organizations seen to be credible.
Everywhere that I turn, General, I seem to get the sense that people look at you as being a voice of reason, a moderate, if you want to call it that. You have the experience, having been an army commander, you've been running a political party. Someone earlier today, when I put up this tweet that we're going to be having a conversation, made an interesting suggestion and said, if the people in charge came to their senses for whatever reason and realized that there is a need for some sort of transition, would the ANT be willing to make some sort of coalition with the ruling party to create an environment where we can begin to see that transition? Would you be willing to form some sort of coalition with the NRM in the view that because of how you have positioned yourself, you would be in a place to help lead that change?
Two things. One, to go into coalition, to move in which direction? That's the most critical thing. But two, an individual, which individual, however good he or she is, can change this country unless he or she is operating within a vehicle. To effectively transform a country, there must be a team of leaders who are like-minded. First, you agreed on the direction that you want to take. In this case, you have to take a country in a positive direction. You have to have the resolve, you have the resilience, and also you have to be value-driven. You must believe in transparency in managing national resources. You must believe in justice. You must believe in fairness. And you must cooperate around that, or organize around that. So there's a significant number of leaders at the national, district, as well as sub-county level. And then when you go in as a team, and you don't have to be in hundreds of thousands, nor do you have to be in thousands, just a couple of hundred such men and women, then you know that now you're going to move in a coordinated effort in a direction where you want to take the country in a positive direction. But if you for example, you go in a coalition and you are a minority, I can guarantee you that you'll continue moving in the wrong direction. And therefore, you have lost the purpose for which you talk about value-driven politics. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, people pay lip service to things that are spoken. As the Americans say, talk is cheap. Anybody can say what we say as politicians. But living what you talk about is the most critical. And the Ugandans who are here in this country, who can be instrumental in changing this country. So they have to get out from wherever they are and congregate effort around whatever parties they believe in to ensure that they are able to influence the future, to move in a better direction. Clearly, those who believe in our values, who believe in the values we talk about, we are a party that wants to walk the talk. And therefore, the Ugandans who believe in transparency and managing national resources, who believe in fairness, who believe in justice, need to coalesce effort in this organization so that in the event that this organization takes power, that we are sure that it will break this country out of the vicious cycle. Or even if it was part of the coalition, that it would be strong enough to exert influence to go in the correct direction. How does it help for a party to get into a coalition or in partnership or cooperation with you are talking about the regime and continue moving in the wrong direction? That means you just wanted to be in positions of power. So if that is the case, some of us could as well have remained in the movement. Why would we have had to get out? I think it was in how many years? That's almost 20 years. Why would one have had to go 20 years going through all the sacrifices we'll be making and then go back? And in a situation that is much worse than what it was then when we separated ways.
Yeah.
What sense would that make?
No, absolutely. I hear you. Actually, and speaking of that, and I've just got two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap up because I promised that we'll try and make sure that we're done in an hour and a half. We've got about 3 minutes to wrap up, General. A question from Dalaya here, which is directly in line with that. He says that our people in Uganda currently seem to be mostly loyal to individuals and not parties. We've seen the impact of unity and working together to rally support around a particular candidate, especially in parliamentary positions. And is asking, what do you think about parties competing against each other in favorable conditions? And do you think it would make sense, for example, to say that as an opposition, for each of the constituencies, you literally have one person competing against the ruling party? Do you think that would be a really good strategy to try and deploy for the purposes of the TKO that you talked about?
Suppose a good person became the president of the country, and look at the parliament, the nature of it as it is. Look at the civil service, look at the judiciary, look at all that is happening in the country. How would that human being, good he or she would be able to cut through that aura to move the country in the correct direction? That's why we have to build a vehicle of governance, or vehicles of governance. If you have got a concentration of men and women who know the direction, who subscribe to the values that we keep talking about, everybody talks about these values in any case, but people who walk the talk so that they can coordinate effort. How on earth will this situation change? Honestly, how? How will it change? Look at Parliament. 529 members. 300 and something of them are NRM, but most of them, I can tell you, the majority of them, out of 10, about 8 can sell their own mothers in front of their own priests for money.
Their own mothers, generally.
How? They don't care about the country. They don't care about the people they say they represent. That's cultural. It's a cultural problem. Any group which will, cut through that must be really composed of dedicated men and women, focused, disciplined. They don't have to be many. I always indicate this because when we say that, they say, Muntu, what you're saying is going to take 20 years. No, honestly. You mean there are no 200, 300, 500, to 1,000 Ugandans who are capable of doing that? Because that's what a party needs. You don't need hundreds of thousands of people. You don't need thousands. Just 500 men and women focused at the national level, district level, sub-county level, and constituency level. That team of men and women can radically transform this country. What people talk about, all these other things they are talking about, yes, you can take power. Then what? If out of 10 of you have taken power, 8 don't care about whether there's corruption or not. If 8 out of 10 actually would desire to benefit from corruption, how will a group change the country from where it is, the road in which we are, and put on the right track? How will that happen?
Very good question. One last question for you, General. If there are any burning questions that need to be asked, I'll ask that we put them in the chat because our time is fast spent. But this one in particular, General, is one that I think...
There's a question, the second question,
there
which was asked, I didn't respond to it. Remind me.
There was one about the mobilization and strategizing, someone saying that they don't seem to be feeding anything that you're doing at the moment. They are concerned that it might be worse in the next election, but I think you had actually touched on that earlier on, so there might not be no need to dwell on it. The one that I would like to give some attention to before we wrap up, General, is from George Bargari, and who is asking, we've had your cry about mobilization, about resources. How can we help you mobilize resources? And he's asking, have you given opportunities and platforms for people to be able to send funds, especially the diaspora, because we know that some of the most passionate people about this country who have access to resource are Ugandans in the diaspora. What's the plan for people in the diaspora to be able to make contributions? And have you tapped into them? And if they want to make contributions to your strategy, how do they do that?
We've got some people who appreciate what we are doing, who keep on giving us some money. It's not yet sufficient enough. Some from the diaspora, others locally. but we want to build on that. We want to build on that. I think sooner than later we'll be able to do something public so that people can get to know the channel through which they will be able to make the contributions. However, the individuals who know members of the party, there are many whom I meet, they contact me, I give them the number of our treasurer. There are other members of the party who meet different people as individuals who say would want to put in 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 per month. They also give them the number of our treasurer. So like that, but we need to boost it and disseminate it widely so that hopefully we can build the necessary numbers to be able to make impact.
And again, I think
for example,
yeah,
like
go ahead.
The gentleman who's if we knew his number, we would get in touch with him and give him the number of our treasurer. If they're able to chip in 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever amount they are able to, we would be glad, be grateful.
Yeah, I think so. But that I think that just raises the point, because wouldn't there be a need to have some sort of proper mechanism or campaign through which we can be able to do that sort of fundraising on a larger scale? If you look at what the Democrats and Republicans do in the United States and how they collect money for their elections, they usually have very organized systems that they use. How do you plan something like that for the ANT in such a manner that anyone in the diaspora, for example, who might be willing, at bare minimum, has an opportunity to know that there's a channel available for them to make a contribution? Because it seems from just hearing you now and from what George is saying, that even the people who might want to be able to make a contribution at the moment don't know how they can be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Vice President of America when she became the candidate for the Democratic Party. They raised 250 million United States dollars in 7 days. Yeah. They are lucky that there is a political culture in America where they used to giving contributions to political causes and also small contributions. Because of that, around $150 million were through small contributions. It was 100 million which came from the big donors. But small contributions people give $5, $10, like that. So one of the things we have to keep working on is changing the culture here, because people give. I mean, I use this example a number of times. I see people who give money, generously when they are supporting people who are getting married. Within a month or two, they sit down and they're able to raise 50 million, 60, 70 on an event to support a colleague. And of course, in one day, they celebrate the marriage, and that is it. That's over. Of course, when people die, I also see a WhatsApp group is put up. Within 2 days, 10 million, 20 million, 30 million is raised. Of course, when it goes to people who support religious causes in churches every Sunday, in mosques those who give zakah every Friday. So in areas where people are already used as part of the culture, they generously contribute. But in politics, there is a big problem, and we have to work on that so that people know that politics are at the center of their lives, and the only way they can influence the future in which they want to live, they must participate in making contributions to the vehicles which will shape that future. Of course, coordinating effort with the citizens themselves. We have to keep working on that. Yes, I agree with you, and we are working on that. And as I indicated, shortly we'll be able to publicize the avenues through which people can reach out to us in terms of contributions.
That would be great, and I think it's a perfect note for us to end our conversation for this evening. General, as always, it's a pleasure listening to you. I should point out that it's always encouraging to just hear that voice of sanity to say that Uganda is going to be here beyond me, beyond you, beyond General Museveni, and we must be able to think in that direction, especially for the sake of our children. I've got two small boys, Jeremiah, who just got elected to a position at his school, and it was very encouraging seeing him accept to come second in this election. He lost by 1 vote in the election, and it was very painful for him, but he accepted that and ended up becoming an assistant minister. But it was very good to see that even amongst our young people, there is that sense of
congratulate him for participating and for having that spirit.
It's incredible. Yeah. So it's just good to hear you every time, General, talk about this, because it gives hope that we are going to go in the right direction. I am with those who think that
My
we are
pleasure.
20 years away. Hopefully we can be able to shrink it to a shorter period because Uganda needs some help. I want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us on the call today, and on behalf of the backroom staff at the NT, Sylvian and the entire team, to say thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Please go spread the word. I think the one takeaway that I would leave with all of us that General has pointed out very clearly is be involved. It doesn't have to be the ANT, but the idea is that the culture is if you want change, go and find someone that you believe in to be responsible for that change and support them. Give them some of your money, to put it very candidly. The amount of money that you spend on beers every week, take some of that every month and commit that to a political party that you support, because it's going to be the difference that helps us go to the right direction. Otherwise, my name is Ben Mwine. I want to say thank you all for joining us. May God bless you, and may God bless Uganda.
Amen.
Thank you so much, General. I thought that went quite well. So just for...
So on the second, we need to end this one.
Oh, sorry. Standing by.
Hey, Sylvan.
Wait a second, let me end.
No, it's not your question.
Okay.
It's just the fact that okay. There was a second one I forgot it. I don't know. Someone missed that. Yeah, there's one I missed. The very first one, I think it's the second you missed it. And I tried to keep on remembering, I couldn't.
May I read the discussion? May I read all of them?
The questions.
I read all of them and answer them sometimes in my mind. I keep checking in their chat.
Sylvan. Sixty on the.
Yes, General.
That's okay.
And thank you for the coordination.
It was good.
And William, thank you. I thought William was also there, right?
Yeah. That's okay. Sylvan, you're still finalizing, eh?
Just 1 second, 1 second. Let me do something here so that we need some bits of.
Someone asks 2-3 questions. You forget, you normally forget. You need to know the second. You might skip. I think I've learned to write. I write. I get to work, I write my daily task.